I don't know about you, but I don't do difficult. I want it easy. I want it quick. In today's tutorial, I'm going to guide you step by step and create 3 Thanksgiving themed cards. So step 1, you need to choose your napkins because we're using napkins for focal points. All these napkins comes from NINNYSNAPKINS.com. There's a link in the description box below. I'll put the names of the napkins that I do use down below as well. Then you need to choose your substrate. Now I'm making cards. I'm making some 6x6 cards and I'm making a 5x7 card as well. But you don't have to do this on cards. You could do it on a 5x7 canvas board or a 6x6 mixed media board. So first step here is I want to protect the cards. I'm a messy card creator, so I made little pouches with copy paper, just tape the edges together, and I just slide the card in, and it just protects it from getting all the gunk and paint and marks on it. First step here is to gesso the cards. At this point, I don't know what I'm going to do with each card, but I want to prep it and prepare it for whatever mediums I am going to use on it. So this gesso is economy gesso that I got from an art store, nothing fancy, and I'm just brushing it on, and then I'm going to make sure that it is completely dry. This will help me blend the paints when I put them on there. It'll also give a little bit more substance to the card. So here I'm drying it, and just a trick, dry from both sides, from top and from underneath. So now you want to isolate the focal part of the napkin that you want to use. And I just rough cut them out. You don't have to use everything or use the napkin as it is. So this one is an element by itself, so I've just rough cut it out. This napkin is called Pumpkin Love, and I just want this part. So I'm just going to take a pair of scissors and rough cut this. Just separate it from everything else that's going on in the napkin. Some napkins are really busy. You just want to simplify it and make it easier for you to see the parts that you want to work with. So once you've rough cut it out, I'm just going to peel off the excess plies. Usually there are 2. I just put water on my finger, or you could put a little bit of glue stick on and just peel it back. Be careful, the napkin is pretty fragile. Once that's done, I can put it onto the substrate and I can make the next decisions of what I want to do with it. Now I can see how it fits. And I can try it on the different substrates, the different size cards that I'm making, and then make a decision. So I'm just going to speed up the parts of the videos that are basically me repeating this. So here I've just cut out the square of this napkin, peeled off the excess plies. Now I want to further isolate the focal image and get rid of all the excess napkin. And I'm going to water cut the napkin. And I'm using a liner brush, just a little bit of water. I put it on and just gently rip away the excess. This gives a deckled edge and that just disappears a little bit more on the substrate. I like it a whole lot better than just having the cut edge. But if you want to cut really close and that's the way you want to roll, you do it. Now, 2 of the napkins, this pumpkin love one and the one in the jar, the mason jar, the backgrounds are white. So if they are completely white, you have a better chance of making them disappear. The thankful one that with the cornucopia, it actually is a little off-white. So it's going to show up a little bit more on the background. And again, once I've taken that off, it just looks all the more, it just looks better on the card. And I'm able to make that decision about what else I want to add to the card. So here I go on this one, and I am just water cutting as much of the excess napkin as I can. So there we have our three cards. I've played around with the composition, where I want to glue them, how I'm going to place the cards, and now I'm ready to base coat the background. Now I want to keep it light. A lot of the background is not going to show because the napkin focal is going to take up a big portion of it. I'm using unbleached titanium mixed with white gesso, and I'm just putting it on with a makeup sponge. It's mottled, it's kind of cloudy. That just adds a little bit more interest to your background. So don't fuss about this. I want some lighter areas, some darker areas. I really don't like it when it's just one tone, which is why I'm mixing the unbleached titanium with the white gesso. And then I'm going to make sure that this is all completely dry. So now we're ready to start gluing the napkin focal down. And I use Fluid Matte Medium. This is the Liquitex brand. I use it. It works so well. To be honest, I haven't tried a whole lot of other ones. Once you find something that works, stick to it. So I'm putting some underneath, and then I'm going to go on top of the napkin, being careful because once that napkin gets wet, it gets fragile and it's very easy to rip. So before I glue this one down, it was a little lonely on the page. So I want to build up the focal so I can add papers or other printables or other napkins. But here I have taken a colored coffee filter. Yes, that's a coffee filter that I put paint on. And I am going to add it to build up my focal. So I'm just cutting it, getting a little closer to size before I glue it down with the Fluid Matte Medium. So this is a good trick. If your focal image is a little too small, here's a way of building it up. Coffee filters make incredible collage papers. I'll link the video where I color these coffee filters, give you some ideas. So again, I'm gluing it underneath and on top. And then it's going to get completely dry. Once dry, I am cutting off the excess and just checking here to make sure that it is completely glued down. Especially since I'm going to send these cards out, I don't want parts of it peeling off and coming off. So I'm just going to make sure, double, triple check here. So here I'm going to add to the focal by stenciling. And I have this wheat stock stencil from the Crafter's Workshop. And I'm going to add that wheat stock detail to the background. And I'm going to use yellow oxide on my background. And then I'm going to glue my focal image down. I was born on the prairies and I love the wheat fields in the fall and harvest time. Now this stencil, the openings are fairly small, so I have to press, but be careful not to have too much paint because you don't want it to squish under. I don't want to lose the pattern. I want it to still look like wheat stalks. There we have it. If you peek underneath, be careful not to move the stencil. So once that's dry, I'm going to glue down the focal image. Now, there's a little bit of that wheat stock stenciling that's underneath that white pumpkin. I don't want that to show through the napkin. So I'm just going to take a minute here and take some gesso and unbleached titanium and just knock that back, make it disappear so it doesn't come through my focal image. And once that's dry, you guessed it, I'm gluing down my focal image. So you can see with the napkins, you can use them pretty much as they are with the one, or you can add to it. Now I'm making 3 different ones here to give you lots of variety and lots of questions. But if you were making cards, you could do 4 of the same ones. Now I'm adding some detailing to the background with my script stamp. A good script stamp is a basic in the mixed media world. I'm just adding it with archival ink. A few places I do use that script stamp on the others as well. Now, remember I said this napkin wasn't white, so it didn't quite disappear. There's a bit of a halo there. And to get rid of that and to make the napkin disappear, to blend out the napkin edges, the trick here is just with a brush or your finger, put gesso, put the color of the background here, in my case, unbleached titanium, and I'm just going over it. And this is just making it blend in all the better. So you really don't see that I've glued something on. So between water cutting it and getting the deckled edge and this step, people would have to look twice to know that it's a napkin. So I'm just doing that on all of my cards. Now I'm going to do the overpainting. And what I mean by that is I'm going to brighten up the focal image colors. And I do that by applying gesso and watered down acrylics. Sometimes I change the color, sometimes I just brighten it. For these napkins, I'm using my acrylics, and they are a little bit watered down, but I have used my Inktense blocks. The key thing here is that when you glued it down with the fluid matte medium, you want to put a layer on top to turn the napkin into a non-porous surface. Otherwise, if you go painting on top, it might wick into the napkin in a way that doesn't look so good, that you're not going to be happy with. So when I'm over painting, I'm looking at the colors that are there and trying to match it with the colors that I have. And sometimes that means I'm mixing the green with the Naples yellow. Sometimes it means that I'm mixing several colors off to the side. And as much as I'm trying most of the time to match the colors that are there, I'm not too worried if I'm changing the colors. You can change. And later on the mason jar here, I'm going to actually tweak that color, and you'll see that a bit later. I just work my way around and do as little or as much as you want. You could only do a couple of the elements of the focal image. You could just leave it as it is if that's the way where your comfort level is. But this really turns it into something that people, when they look at it, they're not quite sure that you haven't hand painted this. If you're working with a muted color palette, like the green here, sometimes mixing in a little bit of brown, a little bit of black, just mutes it down just nicely. You can practice your color mixing when you're doing this. Just using white gesso here on the white parts of these pumpkins. And I just go back and forth. You add a color, change it. So as I was saying, if you were doing just 4 different cards all with the same napkin, do an assembly line. It just makes it so much easier. Here I'm taking my stylus and I'm dotting these red berries on the napkin. This is adding some texture and really brightening that red out. And I just continue over painting on this one. Later on, I do show the original napkin with the finished card, and you'll see the difference that this overpainting and the shading that I do makes. The thing that you need to remember is nobody's ever really going to see the napkin, the original, with the card. They're just going to see what you've done, what's on the canvas or the card that you painted. So doing these 3 cards, this overall, it took just over an hour. So the video sped up to about just under 30 minutes, but and then with drying time, probably a little bit longer, to be fair. And I like to give you that number because you need to know that it's not an instant process. It doesn't, it does take time. Now I'm going to shade, and I'm using my angle brush and acrylic paint, and I'm just adding some shading around the different elements on the napkin. For the most part, I follow where the artist from the napkin has put shading, but sometimes I go a little rogue and do my own thing and change it up. Here I'm shading mostly with black, but at times I'm coming in and I'm shading with the alizarin crimson on the orange just to give another tone to that pumpkin. So as I said earlier, all the napkins come from NINNYSNAPKINS.com. There is a coupon code in the description box. And many of the napkins that I showed at the beginning are still available. And there are other beautiful fall napkins. And she got a line of rice papers, autumn rice papers that are absolutely gorgeous. So please go check it out. So on here, I'm shading on the coffee filter. I want to bring that out a little bit more. And I'm shading with, I believe that's burnt sienna. And here I'm adding color to that mason jar. And I'm using bright aqua and I'm mixing in a little bit of black with it just to get that muted tone, and it just brightens that up a little bit more. It has to compete with that bright yellow addition that I made. So now I'm also going to shade the edge of the card. And here I'm using burnt sienna. I do go back with most of them and I shade or do the edges with black as well. I like doing the 2 colors. I just adds depth to the card. But you can just do the black if that's what you prefer. Now I did some stamping before and I'm going to add more. So now I'm looking at the composition. I'm saying, what do I need to add? What's missing? How can I finish this off? So here I'm using the burnt sienna with my script stamp and adding some of that on there. I'm not trying to get perfect stamping by far, but it's just adding a little bit of detail on there. So here I'm edging the card and I'm shading this one, just like I did with all the others. Now, another thing that I'm adding, I decided this was just a little bit too plain. Basically, that's the napkin glued down and overpainted. Going to add a border, and I love the addition of this. This stencil is called Knitted Stitching from the Crafter's Workshop, and I'm taping off part of it because I don't want to get more paint on there. And I'm just adding a border to the top and bottom in that burnt sienna color. And I think this just makes the card. Couldn't be easier. Loving that. I liked it so much I decided I'm going to do it on here. Now, my stencil's only 6 by 6. My card is 7 inches. So I'm just going to place it, make sure that it's straight, do the stenciling, and then relocate the stencil, line it up again, and extend it. Some stencils are great that way. Now, instead of putting it on the bottom, I decide to put it on the 2 connecting sides. But you can do whatever you want. Now here I decided I don't want to add border, but I wanted to add some of that patterning on here. And I thought to use gold. Now you can't see it in on here very well. In real life, the gold, the shimmer does show through, but it wasn't quite giving me the effect that I wanted. I wanted a little bit more. So I come back with the yellow oxide and add a little bit of that knitted stitching stenciling onto this coffee filter. And then to balance it off, I add some down here on the left side. It's time to splatter. So I splatter first with black paint using my angle brush. And then I splatter with gold. I love the addition of gold on things. It just, for cards, it just elevates them. Make sure you take the time to let those splatters dry. They take a little bit longer because there could be a thick paint. You don't want to smudge it. Now I want to add a sentiment. And the thankful one, had the sentiment right on. These sentiments come from my Grateful, Thankful, Blessed sentiment pack. That's available at Ninny's Napkins. It's a digital download that you can purchase, and you can make the sentiments bigger or smaller with the settings on your printer. Perfect for card making if you put them smaller, or larger substrates if you want to make them bigger. So this is the white background is showing up a little bit too much. So I'm taking a little bit of that Naples yellow and I'm painting over top of the copy paper sentiment. I'm going to let that dry, and then it's just going to blend in. I didn't want the white sticking out. It wasn't a look I was going for. If I wasn't so lazy, you can print them out on tissue paper, and then the tissue paper disappears and you don't see it. I also put some unbleached titanium on this one to get rid of the white. I grab my fine line applicator bottle. This has thinned black acrylic paint in it, and I'm just putting a sketchy line around the card just to finish it off. Don't try to make a perfectly straight line. You're never going to achieve it. So you might as well go try to do sketchy. Then it looks like then you're successful. And I do that with all 3 cards. Although with this one, it really wasn't necessary because I did put the border there. So if I was doing this again, I would probably miss this step on this card. But live and learn. So there we have the one card. Now because I overpainted over top of the sentiments, it got a little dull. So I'm using my Sakura Glaze black pen, and just going over the letters. So the one with the mason jar I already did. That's what I showed you. And now I'm just making this a little bit more darker. Secure glaze pen, they last and last. Even if I haven't used them for months, they do not dry out. I've had them forever. So here is the Pumpkin Love napkin. Incredibly grateful. There's the original with the card. This one is no longer available at Ninny's Napkins, but there's some that are similar. And this one is called Thankful Cornucopia. And again, we have the original and the overpainted one on the card. Thank you so much for joining me. I've got close-ups of all the finished cards coming up. I hope that you know how thankful I am and how blessed I feel to have you subscribers. Until next time, go get creative.